Okay, it is 7 o'clock, and I will call the August 24th, 2020 school board meeting to order. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Roll call. Anita, did you want to do it, or you want me to have Stacy do it? I can't hear you.
Here?
Here.
Here.
She is excused.
Here.
We can't hear it out here.
And have you heard from Trenton? I have not, but
No.
we will see if he comes late. So with 6 of the 7 school board members present, I will declare a quorum. Approval of the agenda. I would note that the agenda has been posted, distributed, and sent to local media. With this in mind, are there any other changes to the agenda at this time? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as published.
So moved.
Gary, is there a second?
I'll second.
Chris? Okay, motion's been made and seconded to approve the agenda as published. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay, public participation. I don't have any cards, so we will move on to District Administrator's report. Dr. Mueller.
Thank you. So this evening I have a few updates for you. First, I wanted to highlight that we welcomed almost 30 new teachers last week for their orientation. And also, all of our staff will be welcome back tomorrow, Tuesday, August 25th. So we are off to the start of our 2021 school year. I'm very excited to announce that during our virtual learning time here in September, that every student located within the Holmen School District boundary will be eligible to receive meals, both breakfast and lunch, delivered to their home. So please take time on the website. You can find a link to order your lunches and breakfasts through our our nutrition services program. We're working collaboratively with the YMCA and Boys and Girls Club to provide the school day care for families in need of supervision. After talking with the YMCA today, they are still working on the placement of some of these families. So if you haven't heard yet, they are working as quickly and fast as they can in doing that. And also, there is on the BGC website also an interest form that people can fill out, because they will have, actually serving students K-12 at the Boys and Girls Club during the school day. And then also, I just wanted to mention that we're learning about ever-changing guidance. And just Thursday, the Department of Health Services came out with new guidance once again. So we are updating our information continuously. And then also, we're learning more through our COVID-19 collaborative. Both of these agencies that we are working closely with are going off of what's called the Harvard model and their metrics. So we're learning more and more about what metrics to be looking at and how to kind of watch our risk level to know how to move forward with not only our learning in the district as time goes on, but also other events, and you'll learn more about that this evening. So that's what I would like to share with you. That's the report for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
I just have one. And I apologize if it's in the notes, but how will you be delivering the food for the students? Will that be the bus service, or because I've had some outreach for some volunteer opportunities if anybody was interested. So I wanted to just clarify.
Yeah,
how that's gonna be
my
distributed.
understanding is Nutrition Services is working with our transportation department. So they will be delivering not within our bus and through our bus service, but also we have vans through our van service.
Okay.
And then we'll also be serving, people can go online and put an order, and they can put where they'd like it delivered. So if a family is getting care at the Y in one of our school buildings or at the BGC, they can put that address and the meal will be delivered to that location.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. Then moving on to reports and discussion, and the first item is the review and consideration of co-curriculars for the 2021 year. And Mark Englerth and Guy Turner are going to be presenting this evening.
All set up?
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Englerth. I'm the high school activities director and the administrator of facilities management for the district. And with me tonight is
Guy Turner, Activities Director and Associate Principal at Holmen Middle School. Thanks for having us.
And our purpose here tonight is to really twofold, to inform the board of all the decisions, all the meetings, all the discussions, and all the work that has been done this summer by our two offices, WIAA and the La Crosse County Health Department, to try to come up with a good plan to move into the school year for co-curricular activities. And we have two options that we would like you to consider tonight. That will provide co-curricular opportunities moving into this next school year. So there's really a choice to be made between one of these two options. Option one is to postpone all fall athletics and student organizations from practice, meetings, or competitions while the district is in the virtual model. In this option, all fall sports would shift to the spring, and all student organizations would only be available to meet virtually until students were physically in the building for their education. And then our second option, all fall athletics and in-person student organizations to meet, practice, or compete while the district is in a virtual model. In this option, individual sports programs would have the option to shift to the spring or start their fall programs as scheduled and shift individually as a program to the spring later if needed. In-person student organizations would have the option to meet virtually or in person if their group is able to meet the risk activities guidance for their activity. So that was a lot. We've done a lot of work in trying to organize our thoughts around how do we create a controlled, safe environment for our students. And we've come up with this chart to help us think through that. If you notice on the first column, it's labeled sport. And underneath that are listed all our WIAA sports. And this was done first for WIAA sports because they were really supposed to start in early August. So we needed to get ahead of the game, and this is what we focused on right away. But we would be doing something similar for this for in-school activities as well. Under that, we've organized them into different contact level sports. So low contact activities would be sports like cross country, girls golf, girls swimming when they're just doing individual events, and girls tennis when they're just playing singles. Moderate contact activities, girls swimming when they're doing relays as well, girls tennis when they're doing doubles as well, adaptive sports league, Special Olympics, soccer, volleyball, and then cheer and dance without lifts. And finally, high contact activities would be football and cheer and dance with lifts. So we're trying to organize our sports into how much contact is involved with that activity. Across the top, you'll see different risk environments: low, moderate, high, and severe. And you can see those are colored because originally they were associated with the COVID compass. And then we have modifications listed right underneath that for each of those risk environments. And then if you look down to each of the groupings of the contact sports, we have when they might be able to compete and when they might be able to practice. So if I pick a sport, for example, let's use volleyball. Volleyball is a moderate contact activity. In a low risk environment, they could compete or practice. We are currently not in a low risk environment. In a moderate risk environment, they could compete and practice. And we are actually in a low risk environment right now, or a moderate risk environment. And then a high risk environment, they would not be able to compete, but they could practice with some significant modifications. And then in the severe, they would be able to hold a practice, not compete, but it would be very individualized. Maybe they're doing workouts individually or doing an individual drill, but they would not be able to share equipment or work with a partner in that kind of an environment. So we've created this guidance through the Coulee COVID-19 collaboration, which originally was the COVID Compass, the Wisconsin Department of Health Services, and the WIAA. That's where this chart was developed from. So a lot of work this summer was done. I would like to mention that there are some safety requirements that we're definitely focused on. If an athlete or coach does not follow our safety guidelines that we presented in the modifications in that chart, we would put a cease to that activity. And we would be talking to the coaches and athletes about what they need to do in order to continue, or we would simply stop the activity. Safety is our priority. Also, if any student or coach were to test positive for COVID-19, we would quarantine immediately for 14 days. And we would notify the proper officials to ensure appropriate contact tracing measures are initiated. And if anyone else needed to be quarantined, that would happen as well. So I'm going to focus on high school, and then Mr. Turner is going to focus on the middle school. Even though we're similar, we're not identical. So I want to just kind of take you through the process that we went through this summer. WI came out early and said that we need more time. We need more time for schools to prepare for the school year. We need more time to implement safety protocols for fall sports. So they delayed the start of practices for all fall sports. Low contact sports, as I mentioned, got moved to August 17th, and moderate and high contact sports practice dates got moved to September 7th, which in its essence pushed forward the first allowed competitions as well. So in that chart off to the bottom right, you can see, for example, football, which should have started in early August, is now starting on September 7th under this new plan. And then the first competition is until September 23rd. And because of that, that really shortened the fall season because we lost a lot of time there. Then later on in the summer, WI realized that that wasn't a flexible enough plan, that counties across the state of Wisconsin varied so much with the risk environment in their area that they needed something that was more flexible. So they created the plan called the Alternate Fall Option Spring-Winter Reduced Schedule. Quite a name. And what this plan did is it provided an option for individual sports programs in the fall to compete in the spring if they aren't able to start in the fall or they were unable to complete 50% of their season. So when do we have to make that decision if we're going to be trying the fall or jumping to the spring automatically? That's the September 1st date. We have to let WI know what our plans are. And that's a big reason why we're here tonight. There are some good things about WI's plan, and there certainly are some challenges with that plan as well. A positivity is it provides flexibility so programs can adjust to the risk environment in their area. That's a good idea. It certainly shortens the season. We already shortened the fall season because we pushed the fall sports forward, but also it shortens the winter and the spring seasons as well in their new plan. It shifts the current season, spring season, into May and all of June. So spring sports will be competing almost all the way to the end of June now. It creates conflicts. This is a big negative between shifted fall sports and shifted spring sports. There is definitely some overlap between moving our fall sports to the spring and the shift of our spring sports to late spring and summer. So there will be conflicts for coaches, for athletes, and for officials possibly as well. And the plan has some flaws in it in my mind because of when some sports are going to start. For example, girls tennis and football start March 6th. Well, typically the weather on March 6th is not very nice, and it's not very nice for 3 to 4 weeks. So those programs could have indoor practices for a long period of time and no competitions even though they're scheduled to have competitions during that March time. So it isn't the perfect plan. It provides flexibility, but it does not answer all the issues and create opportunities equally for everybody. Show you the WIAA sports calendar. I don't know if you've had a chance to see that, but I'd like to point out that overlap so you're just aware of what that looks like. You see there are 4 different blocks. The upper left-hand block in green is the now new schedule for fall sports. The blue is the now new schedule for winter sports. The lower green is the shifted fall. So that's if we moved fall sports to the spring, they would fall in between winter and spring sports, and spring sports are in the yellow. So if you take a close look at the green and work your way horizontally across that chart with the yellow, you see how they're overlapping each other by at least 3, if not 4 weeks. So if somebody is a football player, for example, and is also in baseball or track, you're going to have issues. It's going to be difficult because you're going to be missing out on one sport versus another. Or if I coach both those sports, what are you going to do as a coach? So the plan by WIAA certainly is not perfect, and shifting fall sports to spring does not solve all problems. It solves some, but it creates many others as well. So MVC, it is important to note that some of our MVC schools have decided to move to the spring shifted schedule to the fall shifted to spring. Central and Logan, the La Crosse School District has already decided to shift all fall sports to the spring. And that does affect all the rest of the schools because not all the MVC schools are either in the spring or the fall, we probably won't be able to have MVC championships because not all the schools are present. So that's something out there. Also, tournament play has been changed. WIAA has suggested that they're not going to be running truly state tournaments, but instead culminating events. Culminating events because they're shortened. Instead of 4 rounds of football in state, there might only be 2 rounds now. And they're shortened for multiple reasons. The schedule got shortened, so that's an issue. And also we want to create play that's more regional now, so we're not pulling kids from all over the state and competing against kids that might be in more high-risk environments. Shifted fall sports would even have less of a culminating event. Those will be shorter, tournament play, if you will. And the shifted fall season would not have any tournament play. So if a school decided to shift to the spring, they don't have any tournament or culminating event options. They're just simply going to play games. Each sport tournament plan is going to be held flexible by WIAA, so as ADs, we wouldn't be contacted till about a month before the end of the season, and then they would look at the risk environment and try to make decisions on what tournament play would look like. So that's going to be flexible as well as we move forward. Travel considerations. What we want to do for Holmen is we want to compete with the schools in our region and not travel too far beyond our district. Those would be MVC schools, Coulee schools, a couple of Minnesota schools in our area. Basically, we want to try to stay within an hour of travel is what we want to do. We feel like that's providing us a fairly similar risk environment. ADs are going to communicate with each other when a competition is arranged to make sure that we're in a similar risk environment. We are not going to send our programs to compete against schools that have a higher risk environment in the current situation we would be in. So we would be looking at that and considering it. Certainly busing is a consideration as well. Since we're starting virtually as a district, we would be busing students to school each day for opportunities, whether they were in sports or in organizations if we were in the right risk environment. 2 students to a bus seat, they have to wear masks when they're on the bus, and if we are in a high risk environment, we'd also create pods of students on the bus and we would separate a row between groups of 10 students at a time. So we are thinking about how do we make our transportation safe as well. And then, I believe this is finally my slide. I'm presenting a lot of information to you because there's a lot to think about. Spectators at events. WI has guidance, the La Crosse County Health Department has guidance, and then we have what we hope to have as a goal that we can accomplish. WI has broken spectators into 3 tiers. Essential, those are the athletes, the coaches, all the people that it takes to run an event. Then tier 2, the media, and then finally tier 3, non-essential, spectators and vendors. And then the La Crosse County Health Department, if you remember, they were kind of matched with the low, moderate, high, and extreme, green, yellow, orange, and red. If we were in a low-risk environment, we would have the ability to have 75% maximum capacity based upon our facilities. And then if we were in a high risk, it would drop down to 25%. Really, our goal is we hope to have immediate family at events. We would like to be able to provide the opportunity for our parents and the siblings of our athletes and students who are involved in activities to be able to see their child play or compete. Now, one thing we do have as an advantage as a district, a couple of years ago, we did install Pixel-lock camera systems through the NFHS network, where we will be able to live stream any event that is held on Viking Field, out on the football field, and also inside the competition gym inside the high school. We can also live stream, we believe, other events, but we'll have to get technology worked out so we could do a soccer game or some other event that isn't at where we have established cameras. But we can still use the NFHS network to do that. All right, so I'm going to let Mr. Turner take over.
Can I just ask a question about the last slide?
Yes.
The health department, those 4, is that aligned to the new guidance that we've started to receive from them?
I don't think they've come out with new guidance yet as to maximum capacity. So that would have been the guidance that they were providing as the La Crosse County Health Department itself at that time.
Okay. And for the record, have all of the August 17th sports, the ones that were eligible, started?
Correct, yes. So, nope, not all of them, actually. We have 3 sports that have started because we are past August 17th. Girls golf has started, girls tennis has started, and then I consider boys and girls cross country the same thing, but I guess that's actually 2 have started as well. Girls swim, we've already made the decision to move that sport to the spring for 2 reasons. The facilities we would practice in, we don't own. The YMCAs where pools are available, and because they have restricted swim for their members, they need more time to offer their members swimming opportunities. So it's been a challenge to schedule practice times, and every school on their schedule has canceled with us. So swim is unique because many school districts don't offer it. Holmen is very lucky to be able to offer that sport, but we travel a long ways to compete against other schools. So not only are facilities an issue, but also the travel, I would be worried about where we had to move to go to those events. So we thought it would be best to move girls swim to the spring.
And then one more question for high
Yeah.
school, sorry. If I've heard from different folks that if we start and say, yes, we're going to do sports come September 7th, and on September 1st, we notify them, but for some reason, something happens and we aren't able to play, I think, a minimum or half of our games, are we able to then move that to the spring?
Yes, that's one of the flexible parts of the WI plan. So if we attempt to run a sport in the fall and we practice and we practice and we practice and we never reach the risk environment level needed to have a competition, we would be able to ask to be moved to the spring then and provide an opportunity in the spring.
Thank you.
Can you tell me, what metric you use to determine the low risk?
Good question. So when the COVID compass was in place, it was more clear as to what level of risk we were currently in, because they defined that pretty clearly. Some people would argue that their metrics they were using were maybe a little too strict at the time, but it was fairly clear as to where we are at. Now with the Coulee COVID-19 collaboration, there are 9 metrics they give us information on, but they don't give us an overall color rating to tell us this is what color we are in. So as a school district, we're going to have to decide based on those 9 metrics what color we're going to distinguish, what color we're going to say we are in for our district in order to give us guidance on whether we can practice or compete.
And I can speak to that too.
Sure.
As area group of superintendents, we've been working on what metrics should we be using as to how school should return instructionally, but then also in our arena of sports. And one of the main metrics that is coming out of the Harvard model, and we're seeing in the from the Department of Health Services, and also aligning with the Coulee, the COVID collaborative, is basically the case rate per 100,000 is the main metric that people are using. And so really, how many cases are you having per 100,000? And that's kind of a primary measure. And then we're looking at secondary measures such as testing capacity, and how fast the testing and contact tracing is turning around as secondary measures. So that's what's been coming out as far as, determining risk level at this point in time.
Well, the mathematician in me.
Different.
I look at the metrics that are out there right now. The La Crosse County is around 118,000 population. We have 166 current cases open. That's 0.14% of the population. We've had 1 death, which is about 0.00085% of the population. And of the 560 or 960 cases we've had in La Crosse County, they estimate that up to 65% of those cases are people that are between 20 and 29 years old. Not the older group, but we know how that gets spread around by that group. And I put those numbers out there because it's telling me either there's a strain out there that's not as dynamic as the rest of the state or the rest of the nation, or, which I like to think, is La Crosse County is doing a damn good job of keeping everybody covered and keeping them safe. But either way, we're going to get a lot of calls from the public saying, we're talking about 0.00085%. We're talking about 0.14% of the population of La Crosse County. And to restrict the kids that are only 40% of that total, or less than that, 20% of that total, which brings that down to 0.000035% of that total, that seems like a pretty low risk. And those are the type of calls that we're getting right now as a school board saying, hey, you guys, other mathematicians in my life, Gary, you do the math on these, So in my opinion, I don't think I appreciate all the work that we're doing, and I think it's critical that we keep everybody safe and keep everybody covered on one hand, but I don't want the public and the school district to look at this as a pandemic that's threatening every single person in La Crosse County, because I don't see it that way right now.
And
that might not be a popular opinion, but I think we have to keep safe as we can, keep space, keep masks on, protect people as much as we can, but right now the math doesn't prove it out.
And right now, if we were using the compass, I think when we made the decision, for example, to go back to school, according to the compass, we were in the red. But if we were using the compass now, we would be in the yellow, orange going into the yellow, which is, yeah.
Right. And so that's one of the questions that will come up is, why are we starting school virtually if we do allow the sports to occur? And the answer to that is, at the time when we had to make our decision, with the metrics they were using and the data we were given, we were told that your best decision is to start school virtually. So we had to have time to plan, and for families and for our staff and students to start the school year. We had to make a plan to at least start. But now, if we keep trending in the direction we are, we need to train our staff and get our, we're still receiving our PPE supplies as we speak today, and getting those in place, and so that we can bring students back as soon as we have those in place.
Exactly.
And the last part is, we do know that there will be times where quarantine is needed, and students are going to need to know how to virtually be online. And by starting this way, they'll have all the tools and know how to do that if that does occur. So we'll be prepared in that manner. So.
Okay, why don't we have Guy finish and do the middle school, and then we can discuss it all as a whole. You're ready, Gary, I know.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. At Holmen Middle School, we have a unique opportunity in that we do offer a lot of activities for our student athletes, 6th through 8th. And we do it not through the Mississippi Valley Conference, but rather the Three Rivers Conference. And so as I go through this, a lot of this stuff is the same information on there. I will not go over in detail, but I just would rather point out the specifics regarding the middle school students. So although we are the Three Rivers Conference, we are aligned with and do follow the WIAA protocols, and the ADs have met to determine that September 7th, all of our sports would not begin until then. I have there the 8th due to Labor Day weekend. So starting on Tuesday the 8th would be the first day of practice, which would then again shift the allowed competition dates. Also, please note that 6th through 8th is allowed for our current cross-country program. That is the only program that does allow a fall sport for 6th grade. So with this, all ADs have agreed that if we are going to move into a practice and competition for the fall, it would be for that date of September 7th. And while the WIA is requiring the high school to support or share their plan by September 1, we do not have to at the Three Rivers level. However, we do align with the season maximum length of 10 weeks. So our plan can shift rather than kind of putting us into a spring position or a fall. However, there are a lot of items that Mr. Englert has addressed that really do play factor, especially at our middle levels with our coaching. So the middle school offers these shortened winter and spring seasons if required, and the conflict shifting for fall and spring sports really come down to the schedules like Mr. Englert had, but also the facility use that would happen in the result of needing to be having practices indoors, and what plays a higher ability to have the use of the gymnasium. Is it the season that is still volleyball if shifted to the spring, or would it be the softball team that, if there is that overlap due to the weather, if they were being forced inside? But at a greater piece is our coaches. Every one of our head coaches at the fall sports that we offer, every single one is a School District of Holmen employee at the middle school or high school level. And so with that, the protocols that they have for their classroom and their space, the utilization of those resources, and the coaching that we could have for them to adhere to is at a greater level than if they were to be as an outside resource of a club, if they were to utilize some volleyball club or camp outside of it, for example. For our travel, not having the ability to have our students transport themselves, we would, I'm going to jump down to practice. That would be our first piece, and that way we would also still utilize the School District of Holmen's transportation with a start time of 3:30. Again, like Mr. Englert said, wearing the masks. This is going to be a plan that's very practical, but also one that we would reach out to our families to see if they would need that, or if they were in a proximity that they could transport themselves by walk or by bike to practice, we would allow. The competition side of it, we would only compete within our Three Rivers Conference. And again, we would determine based on the risk level if that would deem appropriate or not. Now, of the schools that are in our Three Rivers Conference, all 12 of them, 6 of them right now are considering to start practices in the fall and compete. The exceptions to that are the 3 lacrosse middle schools, as well as GET here that compete in a number of our sports and activities. I highlight Westby and Winona for their respective sports, as those 2 programs only come in for football and volleyball for the case of Winona. And as a state, the state of Minnesota has said all football and volleyball will be switched to the spring. So as a state, they've made that declaration, and Westby, their decision was made previous to this, stating that they were going to stay more local. Now, as of this morning, or this afternoon, excuse me, we had 193 students, or 21% of our population, that are desiring to engage in fall sports. And I will say that many are awaiting the decision tonight on each of these areas, as the numbers typically are higher than this. But again, wanting to make sure we do it in a safe manner. So we have our 2 considerations here, again, and that is to postpone the fall athletics and move to a spring model, or is to proceed as planned within student organizations needing to meet, allowing us to meet. And again, it would allow for the fall sports to shift if need be at the high school level. Middle school level doesn't seem as receptive from the Three Rivers that this is a feasible option, due to the nature of many of our coaches are also spring coaches at the high school level, so they would have to make the decision if they would to coach middle school football, or if they would be high school track, for example. That's a very difficult position for them to be in. So this would all be based on their risk activities. We would make sure that, as Mr. Engler showed the chart earlier, fall into those color-coded areas.
So there are many reasons why we think option 2 is a more sound recommendation to the board. Obviously, it provides more flexibility in a more timely manner, because we could start fall and choose at any time we want to stop and shift to the spring. So that's one obvious reason it's a better choice in my mind, or in our minds. But there are other reasons as well. One of our main goals is to provide the safest, most controlled environment for our students and their activities. And based upon what we're seeing this summer and hearing about fall, our students have been participating in sports this summer. We've got girls playing volleyball over the state, kids playing baseball, kids playing basketball. Our kids are participating in sports right now. And if we don't offer an opportunity for fall sports, youth sports and club sports will offer that opportunity. And when you think about that opportunity, well, sometimes they do a good job implementing protocols of safety, but at times they don't. I've heard of many tournaments our kids have been at where they didn't social distance when idle, when they weren't asked to wear masks. And I'm concerned about that. Also, if you think about the tournaments those organizations run, they're often in the Dells, Madison, Milwaukee, Rochester, Minneapolis. These are large communities that have greater risk environments than we have. And because we can control our competitions and keep them more regional, and keep the number of athletes smaller by running duels or tries in those competitions, we feel we can have a safer environment to offer activities. So I think that's one very large consideration we have to look at. Also, research has shown that our students need co-curriculars. Many students across the state suffered from anxiety and depression. That was found in a WIAA research project where over 3,000 students were surveyed, and 65% of those students said that they did feel anxiety or depression. So we know that it's important to support our students' mental well-being as well, and I think our co-curriculars do that.
Number 3 there, our coaching staff is phenomenal at all levels, from a beginner sport to a veteran varsity coach. Having the connections and our trusted guidance is going to be key to making sure that it's done in a safe manner. And again, all HMS head coaches are school district staff, as well as many of the high school ones.
I think our students need a sense of normalcy. Their lives have been uprooted since March. It's been a long time that they've felt that things aren't normal, and allowing an opportunity for co-curriculars in a controlled environment where kids can feel like their lives are starting to get back to normal, I think is a real positive thing moving into the school year. And we know co-curricular activities have always been a great influencer on kids' behaviors and on their academic focus. And given that we're transitioning from a pass-fail system that we implemented, not really understanding COVID and what we needed to do at that time, to a more traditional grading period moving into this fall, we feel that it's very important that co-curriculars are there to help motivate kids to really focus on their academics going into the school year.
Already addressed earlier, but again, coaches that are involved in multiple sports are going to have to make difficult decisions, as well as the students if we have changed into a different athletic calendar come the spring, especially for those that already lost out maybe on their spring season, if that is their area. Next is for the lack or loss of competition for the Three Rivers Conference at the middle level. We would offer a lot of inter-squad or intramural competitions throughout the course of the week. And again, as Mr. Englert has alluded to, is some of our contests or competitions would maybe not necessarily be a quad based on the numbers, but in a safe environment of a dual. So the frequency might not be there, but at least the students have that opportunity for competition. And again, with our utilization of our incredible district transportation is to utilize that and support our students getting to and from practices in a safe manner.
So just trying to wrap and bring this full circle, really what we're asking for is flexibility, and flexibility to allow us to move forward with practicing in the fall, and then looking at whether we can compete or not, depending on the risk environment. We fully know some sports may have trouble competing this fall, but we want to provide opportunities so if we do get a chance to compete, that we're able to do that. And if we have to shift to the spring, well, then at least we can say we gave it our best shot, and now we're going to shift to the spring and make the best of a not perfect situation, but we're going to make the best of it and try to provide opportunities there. How about any further questions that we have?
The start time for practice is 3:30, and that's different than usual. Is there a reason why you picked a later start time?
Yes, what we did is we looked at the virtual hours on the learning model that we have at both the middle school and high school, and ensured that our staff were able to meet with students outside of those parameters, but then also get to their practices in an appropriate time. So if a student were to have a one-on-one meeting, or there was a small group of students working on a project that a teacher was also helping to facilitate, that they would be able to still get to practice in time, as well as the same for the students based on the transportation.
And I'm curious about middle school especially. Will there be some flexibility? Because I know some families have done some scheduling for outside things already based on that 2:30 to 4:30 practice time.
Correct, and we'll be sharing out with families here what that time frame would be to allow for them to appropriately figure out where their student needs to be during that change of from the 2:30 now to 3:30. And again, if they are utilizing the transportation, it might take the duration of that hour to get them to school utilizing our transportation services.
Okay. Other questions?
I thought I read, or maybe I
Gary,
heard-
can I let Brian,
I'm
since you've
sorry.
asked, let me just go there.
It'll be quick. Do we have any sports that have expressed interest in moving already to the spring?
Actually, no, we don't. Girls swim was more because it was a necessity, but the other sports really feel strongly that interfering with spring sports is a negative because they've already lost a season. So they appreciated the flexibility of the WIAA plan, but because they overlapped the shifted fall with the shifted spring so much, that they felt that wasn't very fair to have that plan in place, and they would much rather prefer not to interfere with spring sports if they can avoid it.
Well, Chris, do you have any questions?
Not this time, no.
Can you do the screen so that I can see the virtual people? Gary, do you want to ask?
Yep, I have some more. Your comment about being safer at school, I think that's absolutely true. I went to a few camps this summer, and some of them were just done by personal coaches. For example, I got a gym and got the students in there to practice for their own private teams and stuff, and they seemed to be pretty loose with. And they kept the parents out and stuff, but there's no mask, and in some of those gyms they were using pretty limited air. I thought I read, or maybe the administration told us that the state is insulating us some from liability when it comes to starting these programs up. Is that true or not true? What is the liability risk as a school district opening up?
As far as, I mean, I think it's important what they're saying is we need to ensure that people assume the assumption of risk that it could partake in participating in activities and attending school. There's never a guarantee that something might not happen, so that it's important that we ensure that everyone recognizes that. And we do have assumption of risk form that we can have each of our participants and each of our students and families sign in that, which is helpful. Now, you're never guaranteed that something could happen, but that's with many situations in a school district. So.
And certainly if the county health department is saying you should not be in person, and you are in person, or they say you should do these precautions and you don't do those precautions,
Correct.
there's a certain level of liability for that, certainly, so.
I thought I read that the state was trying to insulate school districts from
Oh,
that type
there's
Legislation?
They're trying to pass some legislation right now to basically insulate us from having any litigation move forward,
Right.
because that could be very timely, yes.
And then I see Anita and Barb both had questions. So Anita, do you want to go first? You're on mute.
Oh. Or is she just not able to hear?
I will let Barb go first because she's been waiting a long time.
Oh, we haven't seen you guys for a while, so.
Thanks, Anita. I was just wondering if there'll be any active monitoring of student health, similar to like what staff have been doing?
Active monitoring by the.
Temperature taking.
Oh, okay.
Filling out forms saying they aren't sick, those kind of things.
Yeah, when we have a competition, we will be taking the temperature of all athletes coming into that event. So we want to make sure that when we have students coming from a different risk environment or a different area, that we know that they're coming in as safe as we can measure them. We'll also be asking students to let us know if they have any difference in how they feel on any particular day. So those would be the questions that any staff member or administrator fills out when they come into work. We would be doing the same type of monitoring as well.
Will we be expecting that of other schools too, if you want to wrap that in that question?
Exactly. So that's just the key, and the CDC recently recommends doing at-home active monitoring. So the key for us will be sharing information with parents. These are the symptoms to look for. Please don't send your child to school or to a competition if they have any of these symptoms. And Dr. Mueller is going to share some flow charts that are in development right now to help with that decision-making process for parents, and that our health office staff will use in school, that will be shared with athletics as well.
And does this, is it not just athletics? We're talking co-curriculars.
Co-curricular, yes. So
Sorry.
that would include our organizations like DECA, FFA, all the wonderful opportunities we offer kids at school.
So if they follow social distancing protocols and need to meet in person, I think the way I was reading what your position was, is we still would only want them to meet virtually as long as the school is meeting virtually. Is that correct in reading that, or would we allow them on a case-by-case basis to bring students in under the parameters?
I think we would probably encourage them virtually, but if there was a necessity that a group needed to meet, we would consider that, and if it fit their risk environment and the contact level of that activity, we may approve them being able to meet in person.
Anita?
My question was similar to Barb's. I wanted to know about testing, the health of the students, who would be tracking that. It was pretty well answered. I just have an issue with how do we say that kids cannot be in school just virtually, but we allow kids to practice in person and compete in person? I know there will be guidelines, but does that not seem, that doesn't seem right.
And so Anita, I understand what you're saying. And so when we made the decision and
Yeah, I understand that. They're
okay.
two different times.
Right.
And so we have to have something in place, and that's why we made that decision a little bit ago, and this is current, and we can decide going
Yeah.
forward now with the practices, but how do we explain that to parents? It just didn't seem, it doesn't jive in my head.
Yeah, and so another, in reasoning of that, another reason is it's a smaller setting, and a lot of the activities are occurring outdoors. If we're going to bring our high school students back, we're talking 1,200 students, so we have to have a plan, and they're gonna all be indoors. So that's why we'll be bringing a plan forward, more than likely, of our A-B day schedule, where we only have 600 students at a time. So bringing 600 students together in a setting, and you think of the complexities of school, of lunchtime, and different activities that occur during a school day, it's much different than an outdoor activity in a space outside where you can distance. So just kind of slowly, I totally understand, learning is our, safety is a priority, learning is our top, a top priority too. But we have to start phasing in some normalcy, and part of that, could be part of the plan if we decide to go this way, with the goal of, if our trend in our status, risk level remains what it is, that we start looking at when we're going to bring our students back into the buildings also.
Okay, and then I also wondered about the lacrosse district postponing their sports till spring. Do we know about Onalaska? I'm assuming West Salem will, since they're going back in person.
And what about Toma and Sparta? Yeah.
Yep.
That's a good question. A lot of it depends upon the decisions of their school boards, which some are meeting tonight.
I talked to the president of the Alaska School Board today. Can I talk about that or no?
Sure, if you want to or Mark, did you want to answer first?
Well, I know that the ADs of all the MVC schools besides Central and Logan are pushing forward and asking their boards to approve the ability to have the flexibility to go with the WIAA plan or option 2. So whether they will be approved or not is up to their boards, but I know that they're moving in the same direction that we're moving as a district.
And then Barb?
Yeah, so I called a friend from Onalaska who's on the school board there, and today I just asked her what Onalaska was doing, and she said that they approved that the sports follow the WIAA fall calendar with monitoring and with the restrictions and guidelines. And that she said they're 2 weeks in right now, and so far things are going very well, and the students have stayed healthy. So she's feeling positive about it. Yeah.
Any others?
Smart.
Yes, Gary, yep.
And so I heard you talk about the games, the football games. Is it, you're discussing some openings with non-conference games that were, just try to maintain the schedule they have with non-conference teams? You're trying to look for more non-conference teams to play that are close by, or just play the 4 games and call it quits?
So what we're doing is we're looking at the schedule. We've opted as a district to take a bye the first week because there are 5 teams in our conference. Each team will have to have a bye week. We chose the first week because we felt that our athletes have had a lot of time off, and we wanted to give them extra time to get physically ready for the fall season. And then we would play our 4 conference games, and then we would have 2 openings for non-conference games. We would definitely fill one of those, hopefully with a local school district, is who we'd be looking for. And then there was discussion about whether we should take a week off before the culminating event at the end of the season to have a little bit of extra time to prepare. So That are the thoughts that are being discussed right now.
Others? I know.
I did hear somebody mention something about the hospitalizations per 100,000.
Oh, yeah, that's another number they look
La
at.
Crosse County is at 0.73 per 100,000,
Yep,
so it's less than one person per 100,000 hospitalizations.
yeah. Well, it's, I mean, if you look at some states, look at Mississippi,
Oh, mercy.
71 of the 82 school districts in that state had positive testing after the first week. And then you hear, and I actually attended school in Mississippi for a short time, but you hear that they're not doing any protocols, they're not following this, you know, the precautions that we're looking at. And I feel, I look at the Y program in Holmen, that they were very strict this summer with following the protocols, and yet they had a staff member or two that tested positive that were in our schools. And they did the quarantine, and not one of our students tested positive. So it tells me if you do follow those protocols, then you can be successful and not, you know, passing it on. And those, I think those staff members were in that age range that we keep hearing about. And, you know, having been on the board for as long as I have, it's not unusual for us to see our staff and our students rise to the occasion and do the right thing. And Mr. Englert, I'm really glad you put that slide in there that said that if they aren't following, if they're found to not be following the protocols, that may be the end of their season. I think it's really important that they know that. And, you know, we aren't going to have any vote here. I know Dr. Mueller wanted to hear from the board and get their opinion, but part of that plan for back to school, part of that plan was the co-curricular activities and the guidance and that kind of thing. And so we're just asking you, I think, to follow that guidance and follow it carefully. And people will be watching, I know that. People are watching to see if protocols are followed and to really get that message to our students. Because as you've said, they've been traveling all around the state and not following the protocols because the places they've been may not be enforcing them. But that's not the case here. I think if they're going to do it, it needs to be very clear to them that that's an expectation. And I suspect our students and staff will rise to the occasion again and do that because of how important it is to them. So I'm seeing, I know there's some concern and that sort of thing, but I'm seeing mostly heads nodding in agreement. And I think if you get the message, I don't know, again, we wouldn't do a vote here. It's not appropriate to our agenda, but you know, if you're going to be following the protocol that you have presented to the board, I think then your recommendation would be the one you should go forward with.
So Cheryl, I have a question.
Yes.
So if we're not voting on this, all right, is this just for our information and we had some input and then the athletic directors will do what they deem necessary or fit?
I think if the 6 school board members tonight would have said, no, we aren't comfortable with this, if every one of us would have said that, they would go back and have to have a hard conversation about their recommendation. But I don't see that as being the case. So their recommendation, because that's, you know, we don't, that was part of what they presented on the back to school plan. They're just following that plan, basically. But I think it was something that was big enough and important enough that it be presented and we have some discussion and input.
Okay.
May I add something, Cheryl?
Yes, Barb.
So I just am really thankful for all the parents who reached out. Pretty big number of parents were calling and emailing us as board members, and I just want to encourage parents if you need to do that when they feel struggling about things that are coming up, because it really gives us insight into what parents want. And of all the parents who reached out to, that I heard from anyway, I only heard parents who were asking that they allow the students to start their co-curriculars. on the WIAA calendar. So I didn't hear any that were against it, and I know I didn't hear from every parent in the district, but I just, we go, I feel like that spoke, well of how a lot of parents are feeling, which gave me more confidence in that decision.
Any other comments or? All right, thank you. I think you have your input and guidance.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. It's good to hear this information firsthand, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, and then moving on to the reopening guidebook, Dr. Mueller.
Okay. Just give me a second here, please.
I know it's hard when they go away completely. I don't always
We'll
see.
get back there.
Yeah.
Oh, and we'll bring them back. There we go. Ooh, not that big though. Ooh. There we go. Oh, jeepers.
You're getting car sick.
I know. Technology.
Oh my gosh, sorry.
Oh, click on the other one.
Just won't let me move it over to y'all.
Greg's coming.
There we go.
There you go.
Okay. Well, good evening. So this agenda item is actually on your consent agenda also. What this is we've brought a lot of information forward to you as a board as to how, what things we're doing and how we plan to reopen our schools for the 2021 school year. But we also thought it would be very important to develop a guidebook around to help our families and students and staff to stay informed and just to have a place to find information, very crucial for the way of doing really school in a whole new way this upcoming school year. This is one way of communicating. We'll be putting this, we have a COVID-19 webpage that we will be updating with quite a bit of information. But we will also use our text system that we use when we would call school off. We'll be using that to share some information at certain important times, and then also via email. So in this tonight, what I'm going to do is actually just highlight a couple of areas that we have not talked about and explain about those.
Can I just ask for a clarification?
Yes.
Because I'm not finding it on the consent agenda.
Okay, well,
So-
this will be for approval at the next.
Just for
Board
input, okay,
meeting.
I just wanted to clarify, because I know.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, so, first, within this guidebook, we do go into a detail and description about all the different modes of learning, because there's never been a school year where we have pivoted or shifted between 3 different modes of learning. So it's very important for us to do a best overall description for our families and our students as to what they mean and what that will look like in the School District of Holmen this year. Another part is that we are starting out full-time virtual. We do have, the principals have been amazing in communicating with families and sending schedules, but within our guidebook, we also have each virtual scheduled day for every level and every student in the district. So one of the new pieces is student attendance, and the reason we're going to have this on the consent agenda is student attendance, we will have to add this to our student handbook. So after your approval of this, if you agree with this, we can add that to our student handbooks. Student attendance, it's going to be different than last spring. Attendance will actually be compulsory this school year, regardless of the learning mode. In the blended instructional model or in the virtual learning model, they will actually be taking attendance. So during the school day, kids will be they'll be checking in with their teachers daily, and attendance will be taken. So unlike in the spring, there will be attendance being taken, and this explains how that will happen. Then another one we thought that was very important is to have a lot of detail around face masks and coverings. And just as a review, because guidance did change on this again last Thursday when we got our new guidance out, they are going to be required for staff, students, and visitors, and also while they're on district transportation, like you have heard. It's been recommended that cloth face coverings be worn by any child over the age of 2. So what has changed since our last conversation is we had talked about the students in our 4K program. Well, now the recommendation is that they do wear a face covering in that setting. So that will be occurring in that. And then the other part, if a student refuses to wear a mask or indicates it's a personal choice, staff will use coaching and education through positive behavior intervention supports. And then if the student continues to refuse, they will be isolated and the guardian will be contacted. Then a plan will be developed between the student, guardian, administration around appropriate environments for learning, which may include virtual education. So we do have options to ensure the safety of all of our students. And there are some exceptions, and that is through the mask order. And then we also do have within our guidebook to help out our families on how you actually wear your mask correctly. And parents, they play a crucial role in preparing their children in how to wear these face masks. So we have some information within the guidebook to help guide them with that. And then our staff are also being trained on the face coverings and mask wearing. So this is the last new piece of information, which...
Can I ask a question about the masks?
Oh, yeah,
Sure,
here,
Barb.
let me get you back up. Sorry.
So you see a lot of people wear the kind that pull up, from the neck up, or like a bandana tie that goes down past the neck. Are there restrictions on types or anything? Because I read that through, but I just wasn't sure.
Yeah. And I'm going to have Matt Myers, our supervisor, that is overseeing all our safety, because he's read all the new guidance within a day's time. So
The big thing is multiple layers, so 2 layers, and then covering the nose and mouth. So those neck gaiter or buffs are allowed. Some recent studies of a very specific type say they're not as effective, but there isn't something comprehensive that says do not use. So those are permitted in our state emergency order 1.
What about the plastic shields that come down?
Plastic shields aren't a standalone. They could be used in combination with masks, but since they don't seal well at the bottom, our understanding is that the droplets still get underneath.
Okay.
So will that be included in the reopening guide? I just was questioning because it seems like a lot of the population opts for one of those without the earbands or the ties. And so that's why I was just checking for clarification.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think what we're going to do is put together more visuals and graphics with some of those specific kind of FAQ kind of questions about masks so that we can widely share those as the school year approaches.
Thank you.
all right. So then the last part is talking about our symptomatic student exclusion protocol. So we just recently got more updated information from the Wisconsin Department of Health Services on exclusion from in-person learning. And the thing we need to recognize, this may create an increased or prolonged absence during COVID-19 where a student may have to quarantine for a certain period of time. So we have a graphic that's been developed that is being shared with our families in that is around what Mr. Myers was talking about earlier as to this passive screening that we'll be asking our parents to help with is, I should not attend school if I have 2 of the following, and we have our list there. If you have a headache, body aches, chills, fatigue, congestion, sore throat, nausea, vomiting, or diarrhea. So if you have 2 of those, you should not attend school. If you have 1 of the following, a fever of 100 degrees, a new cough, shortness of breath, difficulty breathing, loss of taste or smell, please do not attend school. Or if you're a close contact of a COVID case, meaning you have been within 6 feet of someone diagnosed with COVID for 15 minutes or more. So in any of those 3 scenarios, we're asking parents, and we're working on educating parents that you do not send your child to school. And then, when can I return to school? Well, if you had a positive COVID test, you may return after 10 days since the first symptom and at least 24 hours with no fever, without medication, and symptoms have improved. If you did not have a COVID test, you may return after 10 days since the first symptom and at least 24 hours with no fever, without medication, and symptoms have improved, or a doctor's note indicating an alternative diagnosis. If someone were to get a negative COVID test, a doctor's note indicating the negative results, and at least 24 hours of no fever with medicine, and at least 24 hours of no vomiting. If you were a close contact of a COVID case, you may return after 14 days, and this is that quarantine, from the last exposure and with no symptoms. So this is really the information that families need to know and be aware of. We'll keep working on communicating this with them, and we'll have this visual for them in the book. We'll be posting it in places, sharing it, and so forth.
This might be something good to send to parents all by itself.
Yep.
You know, because when you get big documents, a lot of times things like that get lost, but I think that's very helpful to help them understand.
Yeah, and I just want to really thank Mr. Myers, because he did a really nice job of taking a lot of very important information and putting it into a nice visual that is easy to read for our families and our students and our staff. So
Yeah, and I'll shift that credit right to our school health services team and nurses who interpreted that guidance with their public health perspective to put together a graphic like this.
Any questions? I know one thing that I've seen out there is, because once they get to school, are we doing screening as well when students get into the building? Are we asking them? We're not doing temperatures, correct?
No, the individuals that are most familiar with the students, those teachers, will do some visual screening and note if they notice any symptoms, and then from there we'll work through a protocol with our school nurses where those students are immediately isolated and taken to the isolation room or met in the isolation room. And again, that Wisconsin DHS guidance that came out last week gives us really nice processes to follow for how our nurses or health assistants would work through that with the student to determine what symptoms they have and at what level those symptoms are.
I just know some of our frontline people, like bus drivers, they are going to
Yep.
be, subjected to students all healthy, not healthy, that kind of thing, and all kinds of symptoms, so.
Yeah,
And we
so-
all know that kids come to school sometimes ill.
Yep.
It's just, they may not realize it, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
so.
So that's, again, that parent education piece is going to be really important. And we know that won't catch 100% of students, but that's kind of our first mitigation barrier. And vice versa, there's challenges with screening before or as they get on the bus. If you have a 6-year-old that gets on the bus that shouldn't be, what do you do from there? So it really is kind of a catch-22. So we're taking the mitigation measure of informing parents, asking for them to make sure they're symptom-free, and then trying to identify those students as soon as possible if they do get in the building.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Anita or Barb? Okay. So then, I think the next item is the 66.0301 agreements. Did I get that right, that name? Jill is going to take us through that.
Yes, so these are the agreements for our 18 to 21-year-old transition programs in the district. Again, we have Project Bridge, Project Live, and Project Search. Let me see here. Oh, gosh. I think I'm just going to show you one of them because all of them are basically the same. And I will go through, let's see, I'm going to choose the search one. So this is the estimated cost. I'll show you two different documents. What we do is we put together an agreement and then we put together the estimated costs. And so for Project Search, well, all of our projects, we basically charge the open enrollment costs for typically developing students. And so This year, the $8,125 is the estimated cost right now. We won't know the final until June-ish, end of the year. So we usually just put the estimated costs in here. So then we send this to the school districts, the resident school districts, so they know kind of what to plan for. And this year in Project Search, we have La Crosse, Unalaska, West Salem, Independent, Whitehall, and GET.
And is this program with Gunderson?
Yes, so Project Search is our program with Gunderson. This year, obviously, we are in a different situation. Gunderson is not allowing us back in until November at the earliest. And so they still have staff that are on furlough, so they really didn't feel comfortable having our interns in without staff back. So we've had to kind of figure out how we're going to do this. So they will be located at the BGC with our other, our Project Bridge and our ACE Academy. They'll be in the distance learning room, and so we're trying to get that set up, and they'll be in a cohort, so they're going to split. They have 11 interns this year, and so they'll split to have 5 on 2 days and then 6 on the other 2 days. And we'll start out that way, looking at some different opportunities to have internship rotations, trying to get creative. We really want to keep our job skills trainer. We have a lot of partnerships, so we don't want to lose kind of where we've been with this program. So trying to keep it alive here in the pandemic.
Okay. Any questions, other questions?
I'm going to show you one thing. So this is the actual agreement, and you can read through, you don't have to read through all of them. If you wanted to know more about it, you could read through one of them. It's basically talking about our agreement with the other school district. Holmen is the host school district. And so we basically hold the financial pieces, and then we send invoices to the other school districts, so they pay us a tuition for their students to attend. We have the teacher, sometimes if we have kids who need, or students who need educational assistance, we would then bill the other school districts to assist with all of that. But right now, this is the agreement. This is an agreement taken right from DPI's webpage as an example of how we do things. They have not updated this, so I have not updated this because I tried to be as legal as I possibly can. But thanks to an awesome board member, really brought forth our job is to be student-centered. And so what we'll be doing in the future is changing handicapped children to children with disabilities. That's how we refer to children in this school district. Students with disabilities, always students first. So we will be moving that language into this these documents.
Thank you.
Questions on the other projects?
No,
or anything?
I don't think so. And if you do, it is on the agenda on the next board
Okay.
meeting, so.
Great.
Thank you so much, Jill.
Thanks.
And then 21-22 budget. Holy moly.
I am not sure I can have them up at the same time. So, Anita and Barb, do you have any questions before I put the presentation up? Okay. Good evening. So I was speaking with Chris before the meeting, and he's looking forward to a riveting 2021 proposed budget this evening. I think that was the words he used. So that's what we're here to talk about for a little while tonight. This is kind of the second of several budgets that come to the board throughout the year. In June, I brought a preliminary budget on June 8th. And following a proposed budget in October, I will share an original budget, and that is the one that officially becomes the operating budget for the 2021 school year. The proposed budget is being presented tonight for review. I'm just going to touch a little bit on the issue paper first, and then go through the major points of the DPI budget summary that's been shared with you.
And technically, it should be the 2021 budget, right?
Correct.
Because the agenda says 21, 22.
think
That's why I
that-
said, holy moly.
I think the agenda's been adjusted.
Okay,
Is that accurate?
The agenda was revised, I just filled it out.
okay.
Oh, okay. So I believe it was revised,
Thank you.
maybe late Friday? Okay, okay. When we're working
Barb,
in-
did you have a question? I heard someone remote. Okay.
So the COVID-19 pandemic obviously creates quite a bit of uncertainty in the 2020-21 budget in both revenue and expenditures. Significant variables regarding like state general aid and categorical aid. Those are in question. We're not sure what that's going to look like. I heard last Friday, actually through the WASB legislative newsletter, that tomorrow we may hear from a co-chair from the Joint Finance Committee regarding the condition of the state fiscal condition. So maybe tomorrow we'll know a little bit more about the plan at the state level and whether or not they will be joining together in a budget repair bill of any sort. So it may be a while before we know in school districts changes that might be made to our revenue from the state sources for 2021. So this budget is presented with many of the same assumptions that were presented on June 8th, which included no change to the per pupil categorical aid and no change to the revenue limit per pupil. This is as compared to 1920. No change to the special education state reimbursement rate. So those are some things that we're supposed to increase that we're assuming more flat at this time. Like I said, they could actually go lower in the per pupil distribution. We'll have to wait and see. In addition, the budget does include the 1.81% base wage increases, the 4.9% health insurance premium increase. There is a reduction in the Title I federal award that I will talk about, and then it includes the 209,000 CARES funds, which in the state of Wisconsin is the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, which is federal flow-through dollars to help support COVID expenses. So in addition to things that were presented on June 8th, we have also added $1.2 million in additional COVID response budget. So I will talk more about that budget as we move through the DPI budget summary. I do not know if $1.2 million is enough. I'll tell you what is included in that, and I anticipate that we may have to revise that as we go through the year based on our experience here in Holmen. The 1.2 additional COVID response budget does include estimates for staffing for the CRVA, as you know and approved last board meeting, to hire limited term staffing for classroom instruction to replace staff in our buildings that are choosing and have been hired to teach under CRVA, so we need to cover the cost of that. And also additional funds set aside for cleaning, disinfecting, PPE, and potentially additional funds needed to support technology for virtual learning or CRVA learning for our students and teachers. It currently does not include additional costs for things like the additional leave allowable for staff members, for employees under the Emergency Family Medical Leave Act. So we'll have to pay close attention to that and monitor that and potentially add more funds to support the additional paid leave that's allowable under that federal law. Other changes that have impacted this budget is that we do have the 2019-20 unaudited actual, so we are getting close to our final audit numbers for June 30th of 2020. They are still considered unaudited until that is final. And then the things that are included in the 2021 budget also include the final project, Viking 2-stage entry costs. So that is the completion of the 2017 safety and security referendum, finally coming to completion in 2021. And then the completion of the 2018 referendum for the high school addition and remodel project. So that is included in Fund 42. The proposed general fund budget does project $152,000 decrease in fund balance. So basically, expenditures exceed revenue in the general fund by $152,000 currently. The estimated next June 30th fund balance is $16,216,000, and that represents 31.71% of expenditures. So you're familiar with us giving you that percentage of expenditures in the general fund. The goal in the district is 26%. So as I said last meeting, we are entering this pandemic in a pretty good financial situation, and so we do have a little wiggle room to deal with this, and so that is comforting, I guess, but definitely doesn't allow us to. We still need to monitor very closely because it is going to cost money. So next, I'm just going to go through the major areas within the DPI format for the proposed budget. This is the summary format. We start with the general fund. The first 8 lines within the DPI budget format include fund balance, and the format always includes the 3 years. So column 2 is 18-19 audited actuals. Column 3 is the 19-20 unaudited but nearly completed June 30th, 2020, and then the proposed budget for 2021. The line 8 is the total ending fund balance for each of the 3 fiscal years. And the fund balance is designated into 5 categories, and this is an action that the board takes each June to distribute those funds between the various restricted, committed, assigned, and unassigned fund balance categories. Again, the total ending fund balance is the bottom right corner. It's an estimate of $16.2 million at the end of the 2021 school year in the general fund. Next is the local sources of revenue. So first I go through general fund revenue and then expenditures and then the other funds within the school district accounting. Line 11 is the taxes, local source of revenue for general fund. And for 2020-21, it is estimated at $14,265,000. As you know, this changes. This can change with the final revenue limit and the equalized property value, which we do not know until October, but the current estimate is the $2.65 million in taxes. Beginning last year, there was a decrease in the technology operating referendum from $655,000 from a prior referendum to a renewed referendum at $450,000. So within the tax receipts in line 11 includes $450,000 for the technology referendum, and that continues for 4 more years. The state revenue limit and equalization aid formulas determine the distribution between state aid and the local levy for the general operating budget. Various factors influence the increases and decreases in the local levy. The school district's general aid is estimated to increase in 2021. This is positively influenced by prior year's capital improvement spending in the general fund. So if you recall, out of the general fund in most recent years, we put on a district office addition and several safety and security 2-stage entries. Some of that is now being returned to the district through state aid through increased shared cost from the state. So that does positively impact our state aid estimate for 2020-21. Another thing that is beginning this fall is the $460,000 operational referendum for the high school addition. So in 2018, the voters graciously approved both an addition and remodel, which we bonded for, and then also an additional operational referendum to take care of the more than 70,000 square foot being added to the high school. So that $460,000 will be added to the levy beginning this fall, and that is a recurring operational referendum. On line 17 is the total local source of general fund revenue, and that is estimated at $14,538,298. Next up is the subtotal other school districts revenue in the state of Wisconsin. This represents payments for services to the school district. It includes the estimated increase in open enrollment tuition payments from other districts. It may also include things like tuition waivers, transportation fees, or other payments for services. In 2021, the estimated open enrollment transfer is $8,125, up from $7,771 for regular tuition, and $12,977, up from $12,723 for special education tuition. So this $8,125 is the same open enrollment transfer that Jill just presented in her 660301 agreements. For the purposes of revenue and open enrollment, revenue and expense, when I get to that, the estimates are based on prior forecast. So anything that changes in our estimate, in our enrollment this fall, based on third Friday counts in September, we have to adjust for that for both payments for services, revenue coming into the district, as well as outgoing for students that are residents that attend other school districts. So again, this is estimate for 2021. Next up is the state sources of revenue. Line 33 is the state categorical aid. Line 33 is the state general aid, excuse me. This is projected to increase from $29,256,000 to $30,707,000. This is the current aid estimate provided by the Department of Public Instruction. It does not include any adjustments that the legislature may make in this second year of the biennium. The 3-year average student FTE is estimated to decrease from 4,092 to 4,084. Again, this third Friday count will definitely tell us more about where we at with enrollment. Line 38 includes the per pupil categorical aid. This budget's estimated using prior year rate of $742. That is currently supposed to be the same rate for 2021, and it's multiplied by the 3-year average. So the per pupil categorical aid estimate for 2021 is $3,030,328. Line 38 also includes other revenues such as the like the last 2 years we have had safety grants through the Department of Justice, and that revenue is also recorded in the same line. The total state sources of revenue on line 39, the bottom right-hand corner, are estimated at $34,219,481. Next up is the federal sources of revenue in the general fund. Federal aid in this fund is primarily through the title program grants from the federal government. In 2021, the Federal CARES Act, so that's the name of the federal COVID relief, and locally in the state of Wisconsin, the acronym is ESSER, or Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Award. As mentioned earlier, that is $209,007 to support costs for COVID. That's nearly entirely spent already on both technology to support virtual learning and additional custodial supplies and PPE to prepare for the start of school. The Title I award has decreased nearly 50% from $248,700 to $123,876. This was a little bit of a surprise earlier this year, and it's a reduction in the SAPE percentage. That is an acronym that stands for Small Area Income and Poverty Estimate. So the 2018 SAPE percentage has impacted our 2020 Title I award, reducing it by nearly 50%. I see this as both a positive and a negative. It is less money, but it means that our area small income and poverty estimate is lower, and so we didn't qualify for as much federal aid. So that's actually a good thing for Holmen. These awards are all on a reimbursement basis. The proposed 2021 represents just the awards that we've been allotted and not any carryover. Typically, carryover kind of trails in here in the next 2 months, and hopefully by the October budget presentation, we will also know what the carryover amounts are for those federal grants. Line 48 shows the estimated federal revenue in the general fund, $490,488. This next one is just a summary of other revenues within the general fund. It includes things such as E-rate funding, forfeitures for flexible spending accounts, workers' compensation, insurance dividends, rebates, recycle scrap revenue, retired equipment sales. It varies very much from year to year. If you are looking at that and you notice why is 1920 so high, we had a double up on when we received the work comp dividend checks in that year, and we also received a transportation grant award that was coded within these subtotal other revenues in 1920. So for 2021, there is a quite conservative estimate at $35,862 for other revenues. The total proposed general fund revenue for 2021 is $50,983,809. We'll move on to the general fund expenditure budget. Lines 60 through 65 on the screen represent the change in costs for instruction. It does include increases in salary and benefits for instructional staff. In addition to the ESSER award previously mentioned, the budget includes the $1.2 million in additional expenditures related to COVID. $886,000 of the $1.2 million is within this instructional budget, and it is reserved for both undifferentiated, which is our elementary level, and regular curriculum, as well as substitute. There's money set aside for substitutes within that additional budget. Post-employment benefits for instructional staff are also charged to the instructional budget. So teachers that have retired and are eligible for post-employment benefits, the cost of those benefits are charged to the budget in the year that they are eligible. The estimated subtotal for instruction for 2021 is $22,710,038. Next up is the support services budget. The estimated expenditure for support services is $18,158,000. Within this budget, on line 71, is business administration. It is the remaining $706,000 to complete the two-stage entry. This project began in the spring and is expected to be completed then in the 2021 year. In addition, within the line 71 is $313,000, or the balance of the $1.2 million set aside for additional COVID expenses, and that includes the additional costs for custodial or technology, additional supplies and PPE and all those, the various other things that we may need to help pay for that transition and those costs this year. It also includes a set aside for YMCA and BGC partnerships for the school age supervision that they're going to help provide for the beginning of the school year. That currently is set aside for the first 5 weeks or so. If that continues, we'll have to look at that budget as well. Next up is the non-program transactions. Line 77 is the interfund transfer to the special education budget. This increase is based on an increase in special ed, also for salary and benefits, without an increase in the Fund 27 revenue. You will notice in the second column, the unaudited 2019-20, there was actually a reduction in the interfund transfer, and part of that had to do with a reduction in expenditures out of Fund 27 due to our closure in the spring. So the 2018-19 and the 2020-21 are actually quite similar in the estimated transfer for supporting costs in Fund 27 special education. Line 78 represents the estimated increase in the open enrollment tuition. So just as I shared on the revenue side for students attending our district that are non-residents, the per pupil amount is increasing in 2021, and that is reflected here in line 78 in the estimated cost of the open enrollment transfer out. So this works at the end of the school year. We're told how many students are residents that did not attend our school and attended elsewhere, and there's a state aid adjustment giving the funds to those districts and expending them out of Holmen. So that is estimated at just over $4 million for 2021, with a total non-program transaction expenditure budget of almost $10.3 million for 2021. The total proposed general fund expenditure budget is $51,135,767. This represents an increase of $2.6 million over the unaudited 1920 general fund expenditures. Keep in mind, $1.4 million of the $2.6 is due to the ESSER grant funds and the $1.2 million for COVID. In addition, in 1920, the budget was underspent by several $100,000. So it looks like a really big increase over last year, but we underspent last year. And so a lot of this is really, the salary and benefit increases and then the COVID budget increases for 2021. This is just a summary of the total revenues at $50,983,000. The total expenditures at $51,136,000. And then on the bottom, again, the adjustment to fund balance between the end of the 1920 fiscal year and which comes to the top of column 3 at the $16.3 million estimated fund balance entering into the 2021 fiscal year, and then the adjustments in fund balance declining slightly, estimated $16,216,408,000 June of 2021.
So we're looking at a budget deficit.
We're looking at expenditures exceeding revenue by about $151,000. So using fund balance to help support, yes. This is always lagging data, but this is the updated fund balance as a percentage of expenditures measure, which will also be in the annual report. But just to demonstrate to you that we are in a pretty good position, the fund balance as a percentage of total expenditures is a leading indicator that measures the overall financial stability of the organization. Last year, June 30th, the fund balance was 29.82%, and that was above our the peer average, which was 22.36%, and barely below the state average of 29.97. The estimated June 30th, 2020, so the audited, when we get it, fund balance percentage is 33.76, and then next year it is estimated at 31.71. These are both above our goal. So that is good news as we enter into the pandemic in schools. So this completes the general fund operational budget. Before moving on to the next funds, are there any questions?
Are there any questions? So I do have a question. Anita or Barb, did you have questions on the budget? No? Okay. So if at the end of the year, a department, the money is allocated for each building and in the high school level, if a department doesn't spend all of their budgeted money, can they then identify, we don't want to spend it all because we have this need that we want to hold it for next year? Or do we automatically take that and put it in the fund balance?
So if it is in the general fund, so program and building leaders, are allowed to submit a request to carry over up to 10% historically. And that would be put back into their budget allocation the following October with rationale. So that's what we've been doing historically. We are looking at 5% for 2021, which was communicated several months ago, just to be conservative, and again, with rationale for why they would like to carry over those dollars. So we do allow that, and those go to Dr. Mueller for review and approval.
So if they don't have that rationale and they don't have that okay for carryover, then it's just put into the fund balance.
In the general fund, it does go to fund balance, correct?
The reason I ask about the budget deficit is if we know we planned with compensation and everything to use the fund balance in order to help fund that. But if we don't need to do that, we wouldn't take money out of the fund balance and do it anyway if there's other dollars available to us. I'm just curious how that works.
Can you repeat your question? I wasn't
I'm
sure what you said
smiling.
we wouldn't do.
I'm smiling because you can't, yeah, I'm confused too. So, yeah, if those funds, we're about 100 and some thousand over budget, so we are in a deficit budget with the understanding we're going to use the fund balance. But if we don't need to do that, then we wouldn't take those monies out of the fund balance and let them remain in the programs, or would we, is what I'm
We
saying.
have just historically always asked for a request.
Okay.
We also, as you're aware, look at, as we're approaching fiscal year end, we look at the un- and underfunded needs list and try to use funds that we anticipate underspending to do some of those one-time year-end purchases. So
And that's
both
kind of what
would
I'm
be
getting at
options.
is, would we still do that at the end of the year if it's going to necessitate us taking money out of the fund balance in order to meet what we've planned?
So typically, we don't use fund balance for un- and underfunded needs
Okay.
often, unless it's requested to the board. So sometimes we'll say we have a one-time need for this project, which will create a deficit budget, and we're planning to use fund balance and get that approval. But just within the general approved budget, we wouldn't attempt to go into a deficit by adding un- and underfunded needs costs at the end of the year.
Okay.
Does that
Yep.
answer the question? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
So next up is Fund 21, and this is our gift account, special project funds. The district has over 100 sub-accounts in Fund 21. I think it's closer to 150 now. And this is for both co-curricular and curricular groups within the district. This fund accounts for gifts, donations, and fundraised dollars and the associated expenditures. The gift accounts in Fund 21 are allowed to carry over their June 30th balances. So that is different than, I didn't touch anything.
I know you didn't. This one. Okay.
That was interesting. So they are allowed to carry them over. We reconcile that every year during the audit time, after payables are done. And so that's a little different than the questions you were just asking about the general fund and the program and building level budget distributions. The revenue is unpredictable because these are gifts, donations, and fundraised dollars. And the distribution of carryover actuals within each gift account is unpredictable, but they stay within the gift account that they're designated for. So, for example, DECA, Show Choir, other groups all have gift accounts. They retain their fund balance for each July 1st after it's reconciled. So this budget is based on the 1920 carryover amounts. The district, something that is new this year and referred to more recently in a meeting, is that the district is required to implement GASB Statement 84 in 2021. So that's the Government Accounting Standards Board number 84 statement. This pertains to fiduciary accounts in the School District of Holmen. Our previous fiduciary accounts are Fund 64, the high school activities, student activities, and Fund 72 scholarships. So usually at this time, I'm also bringing you approval for the high school activities. There's about 6 different activities or clubs at the high school that have been accounted for separately in Fund 64. This year, we are required to consolidate Fund 64 and Fund 72 scholarships into Fund 21. This is because our advisors, between advisor and administrator or delegated staff involvement in how the expenditures are decided pertaining to these accounts means they do not comply with GASB 84 as a fiduciary account. So we have advisors for these. They are highly involved in guiding and recommending how the funds are being used. Both in Fund 64 and Fund 72, we have a committee that decides on scholarship recipients. Because of those activities, we have to move the dollars into Fund 21. So there are larger amounts that are being moved, actually just recently, so that we can comply with GASB 84 and implement in 2021. The scholarship account specifically will be isolated within the accounting to make sure that the scholarship amount remains like a sub-account within Fund 21 to make sure we have those assets separate. And then the other accounts that were typically in Fund 64 will just also be separated by function code, which is how we do all the other Fund 21 accounts to make sure, for example, FFA retains their carryover, AG retains their carryover, etc. So those are all going to be accounted for now in Fund 21. The total expenditure budget for Fund 21 for the 2021 proposed budget is $883,487. Next up is the Special Education Fund. This is Fund 27. The revenue is estimated to increase from $9,042,000 to $9,281,904 in 2021. Again, this is a budget that went underspent last year. If you were to compare 2 years prior to the new budget, it's not really very much different than it was in the audited actuals for 2018-19. The total estimated 27 revenue budget is $9,281,904. And if you're familiar with Fund 27, the expenditure budget is exactly the same. So this is a fund that cannot go into a deficit position, and the revenue that is not through the sources of federal or state aid have to come from an operating transfer from Fund 10 to Fund 27. So the expenditure total is also $9,281,904,000. And you see on the screen the summary of Fund 27 at a zero fund balance at fiscal year end. One of the things that is a variable every year within Fund 27 is the cost of contracted student placements. We did have some reduction in those, I'll call them invoices or tuition bills to the school district in the spring based on the closure of schools. And so there was a reduction seen there as well as far as the expenditures for 1920. But it is a variable every year based on the students we're serving and the placement recommendations. Okay, we're almost there. Next up is Fund 39, Debt Service. This fund is where we account for all of our principal and interest payments on our outstanding debt or general obligation bonds. One thing I'd like to point out here is the column for 1920 looks rather large in both revenue and expenditures, lines 165 and 172. And the reason for that is for the accounting for the recently refunded 2009 B series bonds that we did this past spring. So it looks like we spent a lot of, received and spent a lot of money. We sort of did. We exchanged it for a shorter term and some savings on the interest. For 2021, the estimated revenue, which is levy, is $4,876,550. This does include some debt defeasance, which is a practice that we've had longstanding. That'll be further shared with you at the annual meeting when we firm up that number a little bit more. And then the total expenditures in line 172 are $4,439,525, and that number comes directly from the principal and interest due on the debt schedules. We do have 2 outstanding debt issues, both through refunded 2009 B series, which just occurred in April, and then the outstanding debt that we bonded for the high school addition and remodel. Those 2 combined, the outstanding indebtedness at the end of next year, the bottom right-hand corner, is $25,560,000 after the principal and interest payments are paid in the next school year. Next up is the capital projects, Fund 42. This is where the bond revenue and project expenditures for the high school addition and remodel are recorded. We are in the 3rd year because we did have some expenditures in year 1 and received the initial bond proceeds in 18-19. In 1920, we estimate that this is unaudited again, but the revenues currently for 1920 were $385,636 in interest proceeds, and the expenditures through June 30th, 2020 was $15,092,000. The proposed budget for 2021, again, interest earnings on the investments, $240,000 estimated, and an estimated expenditure of $8,230,973. So if there are any funds left over after construction completion of the addition and remodel and all of the FF&E purchases, the furniture, fixtures, and equipment, if there's anything left over, any remaining balance is required to be transferred to Debt Service Fund 39 and applied to principal and interest payments. In essence, giving it back to the public by reducing the levy that we would need for the P&I on those bonds. This budget does not include Fund 46 at this time. Fund 46 is the long-term capital trust we've been talking about for the past 2 months. It's my intention to take a recommendation to the Finance Committee for further discussion and bring that back to the board on a future date. Next is the Fund 50, which is the food service account. The estimated food service revenue for 2021 is $2,689,000. The estimated expenditures are $2,958,000. As Mr. Gasper, our school nutrition supervisor, shared with you when he asked for your approval to not increase prices to families, he did indicate that he would be dipping into the fund balance for Fund 50 in the 2021 school year. We are very fortunate that there is a fund balance in Fund 50. They worked really hard to get there, and it's a good use of those dollars to help support our family and our communities. This is an estimate, as you know, everything is changing daily, and it's really hard to predict revenue and expense within school nutrition, as it is for any of our budgets. The estimated fund balance at the end of next year, line 185, is $416,000. This is still like 14%. Still pretty healthy fund balance for school nutrition. So there's a lot of challenges there, and he plans on dipping into the fund balance This is a fund, if it does go into deficit, that also needs an operating transfer from the general fund. So we are very fortunate again that school nutrition and Fund 50 entered 2021 with fund balance to help support the COVID expenditures and the impact. Next is the Community Service Fund, Fund 80. In 18-19, we did not have any revenue expenditures or programming within the Community Service Fund. Last year, we levied to support the liaison for our relationship and partnership with the Boys and Girls Club, with the idea that we would continue to develop programming to supplement what they provide for before and after school care. This is still in the works. I've been a little distracted with a lot of other things, so this is still in the works. We would like to propose that we still levy for supplemental programming to support the Boys and Girls Club. I've had, Jill and Chris, Dr. Mueller and myself, we've had various meetings with the Boys and Girls Club and feel like once these kids can get into their building and we start to identify the needs for the population in Holmen, we can help identify the supplemental programming to support the services provided to our community. So for 2021, we're proposing a revenue and expenditure budget of $100,000. This is a levied amount for revenue, and then the dollars would support those services. And so that is still very much a work in progress, and I think it will continue to be in future years as well. Any funds that are receipted into the Community Service Fund are for that purpose only, and they would be restricted and would be applied if there was anything left over in fund balance, obviously needs to stay and be applied toward future programs within the Community Service Fund.
Any questions? No, thank you very much.
Let me see if, any questions? No?
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
So then, the next item are field experience agreements. Kim Edwards.
Yeah, but you don't want to touch it, do you?
No, not really. Thanks. Good evening. I have two memorandum of understanding for your consideration tonight. Both are concerning field placement of clinical students and student teachers. Both Winona State University and St. Mary's University of Winona are wishing to continue our partnership with them. If approved, the Winona State University contract would go into effect immediately and run through July 31st of 2025. St. Mary's University would go into effect immediately and run through August of 2022. Neither of these contracts really have any significant changes in them, and both have provisions to terminate prior to expiration if we would need to. So, are there any questions
Any
about
questions?
either of those?
Okay, thank you
Okay,
so much.
thank you.
And all of those will be on the 914 consent
Yes.
agenda. Okay, well then we'll move on to consent agenda items. We have 6 items tonight. Are there any of those that you would like to have considered separately? Seeing none, if you could put the virtual people back up, Dr. Mueller. Any of those items, Barb or Anita? Okay, seeing none, then I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Gary and Barb, are you seconding?
Sure.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded to approve the consent agenda items as presented. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Then, board member reports and discussion. I'll call on board members in the order of the roll call and ask that you present any comments or committee reports that you might have. Mr. Dunlap, Gary Dunlap.
I really don't have anything to say other than glad to see everything moving along and getting closer and closer to start teaching the kids again.
Okay, Ms. Jagodzinski, Anita, did you have anything?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to thank the parents and community members who reached out and called and emailed. And like Barb said, I believe it was Barb tonight, that we appreciate hearing from parents. I think it's very, very important, and it does help us see their point of view, even if we disagree or agree, either way. I appreciate hearing from the public. And that's all I have. No committee reports, nothing else.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lau, Chris?
I too would just like to thank the families for reaching out and letting us know their feelings on the fall co-curriculars. It was good to hear from them, and the overwhelming support of having that and the importance to the families and the kids was
Great,
good to hear.
thank you.
So, yep.
Ms. Wetstein, Barb, did you have anything?
Just a happy send-off, or I guess you say a happy start. You know, we got the big start tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, for all the staff, and I'm hoping all the virtual things go beautifully, and like everyone said, so we can get the kids in the school safely sooner rather than later.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, Mr. Wopat?
I'll echo what Barb said. I just want to wish the staff a great start to the school year. And then I'd like to just comment to parents and guardians out there that as your students starting this new adventure into learning virtually, to no matter what your preference is about learning, to just try to have an open, positive mind about it. I think it's really important that we model good expectations and behaviors for our children as we move forward this fall.
Okay, thank you. And then I just, as was noted, tomorrow is the welcome back and that sort of thing, and I did have an opportunity to tape some comments, and in those comments, I did thank the staff for their flexibility and their understanding, and assured them that we are listening to them, and shared with them some examples of ways that we have, but also letting them know that we recognize that it's, you know, there are sometimes we turn things around on a dime and we may change direction, but it's because of the information we've received, and on a weekly basis, sometimes on a daily basis, the information may change. But we do really appreciate the flexibility, not only from the staff, but also from the families in the community. I know one of the positive things that Dr. Mueller and her team have been able to do is find productive, good work for all of our employees. So we haven't had to furlough employees. And that is, I think, outstanding. And the work they're doing, you know, bus drivers might be delivering meals instead of kids, and those kind of things. EAs may be helping with the Y program and those kind of things, but they're still helping our students, our kids, our community. And it's important, I think, as a community, a school community, that we recognize that and thank them. And our staff's willingness to do things differently is huge as well. And sometimes it may take more coaxing than others and helping them understand, but as I said in the past, I've always seen our staff and students rise up and do the right thing, and so that's a real positive. I would note that it's back to school, whether it's virtually or in person, and Dr. Mueller and I have been commenting and discussing our board committees. So we are going to need to start to establish board committees, and that's work, but I know there's a lot of policies that need to be looked at and those sorts of things. And in the spirit of our new mission, vision, and values, I would ask that all board committees be reflective of our community, our stakeholders, and diversity in our community. I think it's really important that we reach out and be purposeful in making sure that our board committees reflect our community as best that we can. So I would ask Stacy to send out the sheet with the board committees, just reminding all the board of what the committees are, so that some of you are on and have been on committees and may want to remain, and some may, with, like Chris, we need to get him on a committee and get him active within a committee. So that should be coming out very soon. And that is.
May I add one thing?
Yes.
I also I noticed a number of staff are retiring. And so I just want to thank those staff for just their outstanding years of service.
Yes, we did have 2 additional staff members that I think chose it was 2, correct? The early retirement?
Yep.
And so I think Dr. Mueller is planning to do something as well for those staff. So thank you, Barb. Anything else? If there's nothing else to come before the board, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Anita, is there a second?
I'll second.
Chris? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you so much.